All right, welcome to week 6, new 42, the Pythagorean theorem, and this will be your last new video. You made it. Congratulations. So, let's get right into it. This is an application of square roots. So it's a formula, it's a geometric application. As long as you learn the formula, you are doing the same thing you have been with simplifying square roots. So first off, the formula is, and I write it a little bit differently than the book. There's a reason why I do it, and you will not really have to go into that reason, but still it's just something that I do. So it might be different than you've seen it in other courses or in high school, if you remember it from there. The Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or c squared equals a squared plus b squared. The symmetric property allows me to switch any side, any two sides of an equation, right? So the reason why I put c squared by itself is because c squared is the important one for you to identify. C is your hypotenuse. It's your longest side. And it's always across or opposite from your right angle. Now, your right angle is the one that is marked like this. Okay, so if you go through like these first three and mark your right angle, it's these three. If you then go through and mark where your hypotenuse is, it's the one that is opposite from it. So if you draw an arrow away from it, it's going to be the one that is across from it or opposite. So if you think about like your neighbors, if you think about your neighbor across from you or opposite from you, okay, this would be, you know, if your house is the little box in the corner, where is your neighbor opposite from you? Well, in number 1, it's not the 12 or the 5. Those are your next door neighbors, okay? It would be this neighbor C, okay? If you live, again, in that little box in number 2, your next door neighbor would be 21. They're right next to you. Your neighbor across from you would be the 29. If you, look at number 3, if you live in that little box in the corner, 60 and 80 are your next door neighbors, which makes the C across from it your opposite neighbor, or your across the street neighbor. Okay, so how I do this, A and B don't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter which one's your A and which one's your B. All that matters is your C. So again, like in number 1 or number 3, where I don't have it, I can just call it C. That's my variable. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to write c squared equals a squared plus b squared. I always write the formula. Now, c I don't know, so I'm going to leave it as c squared. But a squared and b squared I do know. That's going to be my 12 and my 5. I don't need to write my units in there because that just makes it confusing. So I put in 12 and I square it, and I put in 5 and I square it. Again, it doesn't matter which order you put it in or which one's A or which one's B. So now I follow order of operations, which says I do exponents first. So 12 squared, remember, now we're squaring. We're not going to root until the end. Okay, so 12 times 12 gives you 144, and you can use your multiplication chart, or the fact that we've been doing these over and over, and these, are probably becoming a little bit of common knowledge to you, like it just pops in your head. 5 times 5 is 25. You can also use your calculator. Okay, you're going to add, so c squared equals 144 plus 25, which gives you 169. And then we want to get c by itself. We want to get c alone, and some may argue, well, it kind of is. Well, it is, but it's got a squared attached to it. We talked a little bit, a couple videos back, the opposite of addition is subtraction, the opposite of multiplication is division, the opposite of squaring is square rooting, or the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So if I want to get rid of that square, I need to square root something. And if I do it to one side of an equation, I have to do it to the other. Okay, so that cancels out with that. They're inverse operations. And I get C equals, and the square root of 169, this is where no decimals are allowed. Okay, I have to use what I've been doing the last, all week, or the last 8 videos. And that is a perfect square. And 169, the square root of it is just 13. So I know that this side is 13. Okay, so now number 2. I have C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Okay, now I know C. C is 29, so I do 29 squared equals. Now I know 21, but I don't know this side, so that's going to be one of my variables. Doesn't matter which, I'll make it A. So I have A squared plus 21 squared. Okay, now all right, 29 times 29 is 841 equals A squared plus 21 times 21, 441. $841 minus 441 is going to give you 400. We take the square root of both sides. I get A equals 20. Okay, let's look at number 3. We have C squared equals A squared plus B squared. C I don't know, so C squared equals, here's my A and my B. So I have 60 squared plus 80 squared. So C squared equals 3600 plus 6400. So C squared will equal 10,000. Now again, if it's not on that sheet, you can use your calculator for it. Okay, and when you do it, you get 100. Okay, so if you're looking here, this was equal to 20, this was equal to 100. All right, so let's look down here. We have, again, identifying where your right angle is. Okay, we can then draw our arrow away to find our C. So that's our C, that's our C, that's our C. That's our hypotenuse, it's our longest side. Again, template. So I have 5 squared equals, now they told us this is B, so I'll let 4 squared be A, or 4 be A, and then B squared. So I have 25 equals 16 plus B squared. Subtract 16 from both sides. I get 9 equals B squared. And I get B equals 3. Alright, so B is 3. Alright. Our template or our formula. I don't know what C is in this one. I know that A and B are 70 and 100. So I get 49.
I'm trying to tell you that we didn't slap you.
Plus 10,000. Whoops. 14,900. When I take the square root, now the rule is here, if it is over 10,000, and you're taking the square root of it, you can get a decimal. So you do not have to simplify by hand. So over 10,000, do not simplify by hand. Decimal. Okay. Okay. So make sure you keep that in mind. Okay. So for something like this, I would not expect you to hand simplify that one. 122.1. All right. And then here we have c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now this one's a little different because there's two x's, but because it's x, they're the same thing, okay? It's just going to be a little bit of solving the equation, making sure you're solving it correctly. So we have 16 squared equals x squared plus x squared because that's a and that's b, or, you know, vice versa. When I add them together, how many x squareds do I have? Well, first I should do the 16 squared, which gives me 256, and then 2x squared. Now I have to solve this equation, so I have to get x squared alone, so I divide both sides by 2. I get 128. Here's an example of where I need to break this down. So when I take the square root of this, I'm breaking this down. I break it into 64 and 2. That turns into an 8, and I get 8 root 2 equals x. So this is 8 root 2, and this is 8 root 2 since they're both the same. All right, let's look at what a couple word problems could look like here. All right, find the measure of the hypotenuse of a right triangle with legs of 11 and 60. So if you draw yourself this triangle, they're asking you for the hypotenuse. Okay, you could call that C if you wanted. And they're giving you the legs 11 and 60. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared. We don't know c, but we know 11 squared and 60 squared. Excuse me. And we get c squared equals 121 plus 3600. C squared equals 3721. And believe it or not, when you take the square root of that, always check if it is a perfect square to begin with, because 3721 is, and you get 61. So the hypotenuse is 61 inches. All right, and the last one. Find the measure of the missing leg, or the missing side, if one leg is 7 and the hypotenuse is 25. So we don't know if it's A or B. We could call it A, B, or X. Okay, but what we do know is this is our right angle. That is our C. They told us that, but we can also draw it. So we write our formula. We plug in to our formula. We get 625 equals 49 plus x squared. We subtract the 49 on both sides. We get x squared equals 576. Again, check if it's on that diagonal that you have. This one is, it's 24. So this is 24. And you can say the missing side is 24 centimeters. All right, and that's it. So you see, hopefully a lot of these are going to end up being, non-decimal answers or perfect squares. If it isn't, like in number 6, you would then have to do what you've been doing the last couple videos, which is simplifying. And if it's over 10,000, you can get a decimal by plugging it into your calculator. All right. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you for the review next week.